Hello and welcome back to Strong Planet Podcasts with me, your host Jack Cole. So today I'm joined by Mark Japers from SEED Madagascar, who's going to tell us about the fantastic work that they've got going on. So first of all, welcome Mark. Thank you so much for offering us some of your time. And you start by telling us a little bit about SEED Madagascar, how it came about, and its general vision and ethos.
Sure, yeah. Well, thanks very much for inviting me along. It's always nice to be able to talk about Madagascar and seed. So seed. Well, we started really in the 90s, and the organisation as we have it now, SEED Madagascar, really started in 2000. But the motivation for the whole thing was the original founder of the organisation went to the southeast of Madagascar and saw a place that was incredibly rich in biodiversity, but was also incredibly poor with numerous different challenges. But strangely, it wasn't really part of the world's focus at all. So it felt like there was a really big opportunity to be able to impact positively, both in terms of community and environment. So it kind of grew out of that and an understanding that around communities and environment in Madagascar, everything is really kind of intrinsically linked. The only way that you're going to find solutions is by coming along with quite an integrated solution. And that's where a lot of the programs of our organisation kind of grew out of that understanding.
What were some of those sort of projects at the beginning?
I think, well, the first projects were very small scale. I think the first projects that were done, this was before I was involved, but the first projects that were done were kind of small scale water projects, giving community access to water through wells. There were a few small environmental based projects, and I think there was a school roof fixed. But I think, the ethos and the initial impetus was actually more around conservation. The person that set it up was actually a palm specialist, and he was there collecting palm seeds for palmetums around the world. And but I think he came to the realization that actually, if you're going to try and conserve forests and palm trees, etc., you can't do that with the exclusion of the community, because a hungry person is always going to get over a fence, and you really need to make sure that people have got the basics. So basic schooling, basic healthcare, access to water, access to sanitation. Otherwise, it's not going to be their priority in terms of conservation. So that's where it kind of grew out, and our 5 programmatic areas now are community health, conservation, education infrastructure, rural livelihoods, and then water and sanitation.
And so tell us a little bit about the wildlife that can be found in Madagascar, and particularly the endemism that's so prominent. I think it's about 80% of species, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I'm sure, as you and many of your listeners will know, I mean, Madagascar's the promised land when it comes to conservation. I mean, I did my way into all of this was I did a degree in biology and then an MSc in behavioural ecology. So, I mean, Madagascar was mentioned on a daily basis as this kind of mecca of biodiversity. And yeah, you're right. It's incredibly unique, and there's kind of key things that really make it unique. But the bottom line is that around 80% of the plants and animals are endemic to Madagascar, only exist there, and a vast amount of those are actually endemic to the local area as well. So it's an incredibly interesting place.
And is it quite diverse in terms of habitats? Or I sort of just think tropical forests, given the fact there are lemurs, and what's sort of the variety of?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's incredibly diverse. I mean, it's got a spine of mountains that go down the centre of Madagascar. So you've got loads of different micro habitats, and therein is kind of where, well, one of the many reasons why it is so unique is because there's been adaptive radiation of species, and because that, in combination with the isolation of Madagascar from mainland Africa, has led to the development of this kind of isolated and unique biodiversity. So it's an extremely interesting place in terms of biology. I mean, one of the things that took me to Madagascar first off was I was studying tenrecs, which are these small insectivorous mammals only found in Madagascar, and they're a great example of kind of adaptive radiation, because I think they probably arrived in Madagascar some 30 million years ago, and they kind of radiated into different niches which were open niches. So, for example, you've got tenrecs that are kind of otter-like and they're aquatic. You've got tenrecs that are shrew-like, living in the leaf litter, etc. And then mole-like ones which are in burrows. And then there's my favourites are hedgehog tenrecs, and if you were to look at a picture of a hedgehog tenrec and a hedgehog, they look very, very similar, but they're completely different. They're a totally different evolutionary lineage, and actually a hedgehog tenrec is more related to an elephant than it is related to a hedgehog. But yet they look very similar, and they fit in the same niche in the environment. So everywhere you look, there's something unique and incredible with a story to tell.
Amazing. And would you mind explaining for our audience what radiation or radioactive adaptation is?
Adaptive radiation, yeah,
Yeah.
it's basically when it's when an individual species moves to different environments and evolves into to have different form over millions of years to fit within that particular niche.
And it's a bit of a different question here, but how do you actually get to Madagascar? Assume it's not straight out of Heathrow or.
It's quite a difficult. Well, I mean, especially when we work right in the kind of southeast corner,
Sure.
the kind of southeastmost corner. There's no direct flights. You can't go direct to Madagascar, but so you can go via France. Often people will go via Africa. I mean, I often go via Kenya, via Nairobi, because that's where some nice cheap flights come in, and you can and you then fly to the capital of Madagascar, which is Antananarivo, or Tana, which is more easily pronounceable, and then for us, we fly down to the southeast. You can choose to go down to the southeast by taxi Bruce or bush taxi. But I mean, to compare and contrast the ways of travelling, Madagascar's huge. So to fly takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours from the centre down to the southeast. Whereas to get a taxi Bruce, I've done it once, and it took about 4 days of day and night travelling. So pretty hardcore when it comes to travelling. It's not something which I would probably do again.
Fair enough. Blimey, goodness. Okay, and so you mentioned a few species there. So tell us how their habitats and their general kind of welfare has changed over the past decades.
It's changing all the time, and Madagascar is very much a place in crisis in terms of conservation. And there are so many threats that are pushing changes within Madagascar and with biodiversity. The vast amount of plants and animals in Madagascar are endangered. Many are not even described by science, particularly within floral populations. Of course, most people know about the lemurs, of which there's 100 odd species, I think 110 species of lemur now that have been classified. They're all to some degree endangered. I think there's a couple which aren't, like ring-tailed lemur, etc. But the main threats, I would probably put it down to probably about 8 main threats, I would say. Population growth is a huge one. Madagascar's a very young population. Most people are living on subsistence agriculture, so they're relying on cutting forests to be able to plant crops, and that population is growing hugely. To illustrate that, when I first started with the organisation 25 years ago, the population of Madagascar was around 13 sorry, no, 16 million. The population now is over 32 million, so it doubled in the time that I've been working for the organisation, which is putting huge amounts of strain on biodiversity. And that's pushing deforestation, which is, in the region of 90%, and habitat loss. So you've only got small, just 10% of the remaining forest left. With that increasing population, you've got overexploitation of species. So there's numerous examples, but where we are, there's a palm which is a unique palm to the area, where the young palms are used to make lobster baskets, and people have cut all the palms down to the point where there's virtually none left. We're doing an effort actually to increase those numbers. Climate change is massive, and I think we all know that climate change has a disproportionate effect in countries like Madagascar. And to illustrate that, just this year, we started the year with a serious drought, which meant that no one could plant anything, and nothing would thrive in the fields. That gave way very quickly to issues of fire and wildfires, which caused major problems across forests that we were working in. Then the whole thing flipped, and the heavens opened, and there was issues of flooding all over Madagascar, bridges being washed away, and then finally we had some large cyclones which were blowing roofs off schools and causing further havoc. And that's all in the first 4 months of the year, 3-4 months of the year. So astonishing, and all of those things are quite uncharacteristic for the time of year, and certainly in terms of their magnitude. There's various other things. Invasive species, of course, black rats, cats, the usual story of animals coming in, out competing or destroying, native plants. But I think you probably also need to talk about the weakness of the Malagasy government and the lack of resources that are there. They just simply don't have the money to be able to protect the parks, etc. And I'd probably mention another couple. I probably would say that mining has to be taken into account as a thing which is pushing back biodiversity. Where we are in the southeast, jobs are needed, and certainly mining is a required thing, but it does have a negative effect on biodiversity in general. And I think perhaps the final and most contemporary thing I would mention, which is having an effect on biodiversity in Madagascar, is these cuts. Government cuts for spending, the US, the UK, German government. These are all putting further pressure on an already very delicate system.
And something a bit more specifically mentioned there, that crossover between sort of rats and species, isn't it a bit of a hotbed for a lot of quite not just tropical diseases, but Black Plague, for example, I've heard of, or bubonic plague, and various outbreaks of some quite sort of diseases we thought we'd left in the past?
Absolutely. Well, and there've been. I think it's a real indication of the lack of capacity of healthcare in Madagascar, but and the levels of poverty. Most people will go through their entire life and not see a doctor. So there's very, very few doctors. But yeah, there's been outbreaks over the past few years of bubonic plague in the north of Madagascar. So yeah, pretty scary. But they're the kind of dramatic titles. But the reality is that at the moment, infant mortality is around kind of 1 in 10, and those children that are dying, they're dying of things not nearly as dramatic as bubonic plague. It's often dehydration, things that could easily be prevented, but aren't because of the lack of capacity, because of the lack of access to healthcare. And therein is one of the things that SEED is trying to work on. We're, for example, trying to really strengthen the network of community clinics where people can get support and help. We're trying to build people's knowledge and understanding of, for example, sexual health and maternal health, and all of these areas to try and redress that balance.
I think that ties in perfectly, actually, to my next question, which was to ask, what are some of the projects that you're focusing on currently? Obviously, you've touched on a few there. I'm just curious to know a little bit more of the day in,
Well,
day
yeah,
out.
how long you got?
Yeah,
There's a lot of
yeah,
projects. I mean, at any one point, we're running between kind of 10 and 15 projects in general, covered in those programmatic areas. I think I'd probably highlight a couple of projects just to mention. One of the issues in Madagascar, one of the things that drives this poverty, ongoing poverty, is the fact that there's very little education. Where we work in the southeast of Madagascar, less than half children actually ever go to school, which is an astonishing statistic. Now, the reason why they're not going to school is not necessarily because they don't want to go to school, it's because there aren't any schools. So we work closely with communities that request help, and we work with local government, and we go to those communities that don't have adequate education resources, and we build schools. We've built around over 80 classrooms now,
well,
and typically the projects are you build the school itself, usually a 3-classroom school. You build accommodation for the teacher. We build all of the furniture, all the benches, all of the teachers' tables and stuff. Typically, we'll build girls and boys toilets, and a menstrual hygiene unit for girls, because the issues of education disproportionately affect girls. A water source, usually either a well or rainwater harvest system, so that people not only have water to drink, but they can wash their hands after using the toilet and the like.
very quickly, sorry to interrupt you. I'm just really curious in terms of capacity building and building up all these facilities. Is that using sort of local resources, local tradesmen? Is it sort of imported? How's that sort of
Yeah, good question, and it's an important one.
yeah,
We've got a building team which is entirely Malagasy. In fact, I mean, our organisation numbers around 100 people, of which 90% are Malagasy. And every time our building team goes to a new community, we've got our Malagasy building team, but they also employ people from the local community, and local community are expected to contribute as well. So when we're putting together these quite comprehensive projects, they're at the request of local community, but they're also with the support of local community as well. So there's all of that building work, and putting together of the buildings, and then we also do an environmental element where we offset the work, and all of the carbon footprint of the project with a tree planting program. Some schools also have a solar element now as well. So it's a pretty comprehensive program on schools, and it's one which we're constantly trying to raise funds for, because basically the limitation is how much funds we can find to build schools. There's almost a limitless amount of requests. For every one school we build, there's always 2 that are waiting to be built at some point, basically.
I didn't know someone from Madagascar was called Malagasy. That's so interesting.
What's that? Say again?
I didn't know someone from Madagascar was called Malagasy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
Oh, brilliant.
Indeed.
Okay. Okay. So currently things always are in sort of NGO charity world, aren't they? Sort of, completely fund dependent, going through a bit of a difficult time, generally. But if things carry on as they are, it sounds like things are headed in a positive direction, and things are growing. So many initiatives, 10 to 15 that you mentioned. Where could SEED Madagascar be in, say, 10, 15 years? Any sort of timescale you think's appropriate? And what would be some additional things? What would be next? What would be on kind of the frontier of where you'd like to push the work?
Yeah, great. Good question. Well, I mean, ultimately, in 10 years' time, what I hope is that we're closer to fulfilling our organisation vision, which is a thriving and healthy and sustainable Madagascar. If we're getting closer to that, then I'd be extremely happy. I children in rural communities to have access to schooling. I want them to have access to healthcare. I want them to understand the global importance of the biodiversity of which they are custodians. And I would like them to be generating an income that gets them everything that they want in a sustainable way. That's the dream. And I think for us, we're constantly on a path of that. We're constantly trying to fulfill our mission of increasing resilience, both in terms of environment and in terms of community. And we're certainly having a big impact. I think in order to really accelerate that, what's needed is for us to be able to continue to increase awareness about Madagascar and the needs in Madagascar, and podcasts like this are really important for that. And it's also about finding the funding. For every one project that's run, there's one project that isn't run because we couldn't find the money. So yeah, the vision is sustainability, basically.
What do you love about Madagascar?
So many things. I love the warmth and humility of the community and the people. I went to Madagascar as a biologist, and I was just really interested in rats and birds and things like that. But very quickly my head was turned, and I had the privilege to stay within a community to do the work which I was doing, and people had absolutely nothing, but yet they would want to help in any way that they could, and that was a humbling experience. You'd wander through it was a traditional thing that we were told to do, to go through the village and say hello to people, sit on their mat, have a conversation, and people would bring out 2 bananas to give you as a gift, and you'd know that basically their livelihood was 30 bananas that were sitting in their place, and they were giving you 2. And for a cynical, born in London Brit, that was deeply, deeply humbling. And so I kind of made a promise to myself 25 years ago that I would get involved in some way, shape or form. I have no idea I'd end up where I am now, but for me it's just a privilege to be able to kind of act and support in that way, and to actually be able to affect positive change. It's a massive honour and privilege.
Mark, where can people find you, see Madagascar, I should say, Malagasy, if they want to get involved, donate, or just follow your work?
Well, probably a good place to start is our website, madagascar.co.uk. There's a donate button, and people can donate. We're also on many of the platforms that people will know, like Global Giving, Enthuse. We'll be doing a big give appeal this year. Anyone that's interested in kind of getting involved more on the actual physical front, we actually run a conservation program, where people can go out and work on some of the conservation-based research that we're doing and some of the conservation projects that we run. That's called SEED Conservation and Research Program, and there's information on our website. But I would also invite people to just, drop me an email. If you're part of a business and you're thinking, hang on, we need to do something for our corporate social responsibility or our ESG, maybe we could sponsor a classroom, and SEED could give us lots of information to make sure that it's a big mutually beneficial partnership. Just write to me. It's a simple email. It's mark@seedmadagascar.org. So, and I'm sure you can share that afterwards as well. So I welcome every conversation, and there's always ways that people can help.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you for asking me on.
Talipale, manangem talipale, manangem talipale.